All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Um, I thought this tonight, this week, with the death of little Shay, obviously been thinking about the practices for the time of death, and it brought to mind again this, remarkable. We have such little exposure in the West to these traditions and also even the different traditions within Buddhism. For us, it all just sort of is just one big thing. It's Buddhism, a little bit here, a little bit there. And to know the distinctions and the different traditions within the Buddha Dharma, is not something that is kind of laid out there so well. And so we don't always know. But I was struck this week because of the fact that we are thinking about, practices to help someone who's died and how that naturally helps channel the grief that the bereaved have. We have this unusual, you would think they're maybe as far apart in outer appearance, maybe, as you can find in the Buddhist world, but the Sutric Pure Land teachings and then the Tantric teachings seem very different in outer appearance in that. And yet, what's interesting is that the motive force with each of them is like pure faith. They both use the moment of death, the experience of death, as the most opportune time for a practitioner. And of course, once to the degree that one gains some degree of confidence in this, it immediately benefits one in this life because no longer is every up and down in one's conscious world the sole focus of everything. Instead, things are put in perspective. And no matter what kind of negative karmas, negative experiences, unfair, so to speak, events, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and all, one has this confidence that the moment of death cannot be taken away from us. So in the sutra teachings, the focus is on Buddha Amitabha and Buddha Amitayos. They're the same, just kind of like different aspects. The Buddha of infinite light, Amitabha, and the Buddha of infinite life, Amitayos. That in the name is just like our agnostic, atheist, a cappella, that meaning without. So without limit light, without limit life is actually what the Sanskrit titles mean. But so in the Pure Land Sutra practices, it's just this faith in Buddha Amitabha and then saying his name, basically. So it's sort of similar to a mantra in some ways. But this everything is, it's said that everything is really given over, you might say, to the nature of mind, but given over to Amitabha. And the example that's given is that normally when we Amitabha is like the wind blowing a great ship, or you could say it is like a ship that we get on this great ship. And although it's very hard to go around the ocean without a ship, with a ship it becomes easier. Ship is taking you seemingly. Now we have to do some things. We have to do some effort. We have to put up sails so we can catch the wind. But really, it's all in the hands of other power, and that too takes a kind of pressure off our ego type of existence, our ego grasping existence. It's very pure. But it's said that at the moment of death, especially, all the merit that one has accumulated from this reciting Amitabha's name, it all kind of like, crystallizes or focuses on that moment. And there's a tremendous spiritual power for realization. Now, on the tantric side, it too has more detail, you might say. And in that sense, it's especially effective, I think, but also in building faith because it gives you something. Very hard for Americans, I think, to come out of the box, or Westerners to come out of the box and have tremendous faith in Amitabha. It's Lamatarchan's wife told me, and she was American, and she told me how, Lamatarchan had this idea when they got his retreat center in the Santa Cruz Mountains outside of Santa Cruz, California. He had this aspiration and started building this big Guru Rinpoche statue. And his wife told me, she said, it was so difficult for me because here she was, an American from California. She didn't have any feeling for Guru Rinpoche. She didn't know who that was, didn't have any kind of connection to Guru Rinpoche, nothing there, seemed all kind of artificial. But Lamatarchan, of course, is going ahead with this big project. So finally, the statue was done. And the first thing they do when they're going to consecrate it, the last thing done is painting the eyes. And people are up on some sort of scaffold painting the eyes. And as they painted the eyes, Regina just burst into tears. She was totally overwhelmed. And this is kind of the mystery of it for all of us. Because although these things may seem like, I never heard about this in school, this isn't part of our culture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I'm going to make something up instead. But of course, these are expressions of our true nature. And they're not just expressions, they are our true nature. And therefore, there's a power inherent in them. So on the tantric side, again, all this kind of detail, this really genius introduction that His Holiness Dalai Lama wrote to this first complete translation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. How our true nature has, you might say 3 aspects or 3 qualities. The words don't quite work. But first, the Dharmakaya, just the limitlessness. Again, they give you the example of, vast space. That's why in the Tankas, you often see this dark blue color. It's like, as if you were at Tibet at 14,000 feet looking up at the sky. The sky there is a little bit darker blue than what we're used to at sea level. Sort of heading towards space, but yet it has color, it has quality, but it's ineffable. You can't really put your finger on it. So this is Dharmakaya. This is our nature. But our nature is also Sambhogakaya. The body of bliss, these subtle level existences, not on a biological level, but yet on a subtle mind level. So in a sense, there's something we can work with, almost like I think of it as genetic, engineering. You make a little tiny change in a very deep level, and you get big manifestations on the gross level. And this is referred to, the Sambhogakaya, Dalai Lama says, is like the vast cumulus clouds sporting around in that vastness of space. You can't touch them, but yet you can see them. They have some sort of form. You're more easily able to relate to them than to the Dharmakaya. And then they're Nirmanakaya. This is the deceptive body of the Buddha. And I love that term, that it's deceptive. It prevents the Buddhists from being all completely high and mighty about themselves, because they realize we're in such a state with our ordinary samsara kind of mind. We're in such an ordinary state when we're defined by our self-grasping. We're seeing everything through that. It's deceptive. And yet, although it's deceptive, it's still Buddha. It still can be relied on. In fact, more easily relied on, because we can sort of see it and grab it. It exists in the way that we're absolutely convinced things do exist. it doesn't seemingly involve. There's faith there too, but kind of a different and easier faith, you might say, than in the Sambhogakaya, or certainly the Dharmakaya. So the Dalai Lama, in this tremendous skillfulness, says this is our nature, and that these manifestations of our nature are most easily accessible at certain key times. So at the moment of death, when everything dissolves, this process that after the medical death, roughly a half an hour while the internal elements are dissolving, and we get into a state of unconsciousness, and then coming out of that, this is the Dharmakaya. This completely limitless, but it's just an instant. And of course, our karmic force is such that if we recognize it, this is full Buddhahood. And if we don't, other things start manifesting. And what manifests is the Sambhogakaya. All of these dreamlike apparitions. The mind is functioning, but again, in this very non-material way. But again, if we recognize there, so if we're practicing, Vajrakalaya or Tara, and she appears, we can become one with her. And that is full Buddhahood too, but through the Sambhogakaya. And then finally, our rebirth is the Nirmanakaya. We take this body again, and the process starts over. But this one-to-one correspondence between our nature, our true nature, and ways of accessing it at these especially opportune times is similar, you might say, to the sutric Pure Land being reborn in Buddha Amitabha's Pure Land at the moment of death. Now, actually, the sutra there are 3 Pure Land sutras, and one is very short, one is medium, one is longer. And it also describes, the longer one describes being reborn in the Pure Land. And interestingly, there are, I can't remember how many, I'll have to look, like 16 different levels of rebirth, depending on one's karma, one's insight. They're all pure. You find yourself in the Pure Land. And what is a Pure Land? The Pure Land is this state of existence where everything is conducive to Dharma. So there's no more falling back. It's said that the birds are singing the Dharma. The wind is making the sound of the Dharma. It's teaching you through the wind. The brooks, the water gurgling is teaching the Dharma. Everything conducive. It's said that you can go to other Pure Lands and take teachings from other Buddhas and then return as you like. Everything wonderful. But in these different levels of realization of the Pure Land, it gets more and more subtle. It says the first level, for instance, you find yourself born inside. You're in the Pure Land, but there's a lotus bud, a lotus that hasn't opened yet. You're inside that bud. And when I first heard this, it's kind of claustrophobic. It sounded like, oh my goodness, that sounds like a hellish existence. Except it's not. It's completely delightful because you can hear Buddha Amitabha teaching, and you're just quite happy to be in that lotus bud. And of course, you will come out of it at some time as the development continues. But again, this subtle teaching, a detailed teaching, different levels of realization, and the higher levels, are Dharmakaya. There's no sighting of Buddha Amitabha at all. You're Buddha Amitabha's mind. So these sutras, I thought I'd read a little bit of one of the Pure Land sutras because there's a beautiful story. The sutra on the visualization of the Buddha of infinite life, delivered by Shakyamuni Buddha. And interesting. This is translated into Chinese during the Liu Sung dynasty. I don't know when that is, by Tripitaka master Kalyayashas of Central Asia. And because of my daughter's work with so much, Central Asian, it's very interesting to me that, this is coming into China. Now we think of it as Chinese sutra, but of course, it's not. Let me see if I can find the reference to this master, Kalyayashas. Kalyayashas. Don't know how to pronounce it. 24. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, all right. This is this was done. This was translated sometime between the year 424 and 453. I'd like to know, maybe Megan knows what part of Central Asia he was from. She's translated a smaller sutra about from Khotan. Somehow, I can't remember the story, but the teachings coming back to Tibet from Khotan. We'll have to get that from her sometime. At any rate, so this is traditionally believed to have been recited by Ananda, one of the Buddha's 10 great disciples, and the only one who did not come to full arhatship during the Buddha's life, but he did after the Buddha's life. He was the one that memorized his teachings, was his attendant for years and years and years, and then recited it at this first great Buddhist kind of convocation that took place on a mountain in Rajgir, where you can go there today. Much of the cave has fallen away with erosion, but you're at this unusual spot where this route big, we call it a mountain, but it's really not, but this giant rock outcropping. And right on the edge of the, Ganges Plains, and you can just see for miles, Rajgir, Vulture Peak. At any rate, thus have I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Vulture Peak in Rajgir with a great assembly of 1,250 monks. He was also accompanied by 32,000 bodhisattvas, led by Manjushri, the Dharma prince. At that time, in the great city of Rajgir, there was a prince named Ajatasattu, instigated by his wicked friend Devadatta, who was the Buddha's cousin. He seized his father, King Bimbisara, who was one of the initial patrons of the Buddha, confined him in a room with walls 7 deep, and forbade all the court officials to visit the king. Vaidehi, the king's consort, was devoted to him. After having bathed and cleansed herself, she spread over her body ghee and honey mixed to a paste with wheat flour, filling her ornaments with grape juice, and secretly offered this food and drink to the king. He ate the flour paste, drank the juice, and then asked for water. Having rinsed his mouth, he joined his palms in reverence and, facing Vulture Peak, worshipped the world-honored one from afar and said, Maha Madgalyayana is my close friend. I beseech you to have pity on me and send him here to give me the 8 precepts. So Madgalyayana, again, is one of the 10 great disciples of the Buddha, 10 closest disciples. And he was the brother of Shariputra. And Madgalyayana was considered to have like the greatest psychic power. And he was later in his career murdered. So these stories are very real. Then Maha Madgalyayana flew as swiftly as a hawk to the king. Day after day, he came like this to give the king the 8 precepts. The world-honored one also sent the venerable Purna to the palace to expound the Dharma to the king. 3 weeks passed in this way. Because he had eaten the flour paste and heard the Dharma, he appeared peaceful and contented. Then Ajatasattu asked the guard, is my father still alive? The guard replied, Great king, his consort spreads flour paste over her body, fills her ornaments with grape juice, and offers these to the king. The monks Maha Madgalyayana and Purna come here through the air to expound the Dharma to him. It is impossible to stop them. Hearing this, Ajatasattu became furious with his mother and said, because you are an accomplice of that enemy, mother, you too are an enemy. Those monks are evil, for with their delusive magic, they have kept this wicked king alive for many days. So saying, he drew his sharp sword, intending to kill her. At that time, the king had a minister named Chandra Prabha, who was intelligent and wise. Together with the Jivaka, he made obeisances to the king and said, Great king, according to a certain Vedic scripture, Since the beginning of this cosmic period, there have been 18,000 wicked kings who have killed their fathers out of their desire to usurp the throne, but we have never heard of anyone who has committed the outrage of killing his mother. Your Majesty, if you commit such an outrage, you will bring disgrace upon the Kshatriya class, that's the warrior class. As your ministers, we cannot bear to hear what people will say, as this would be the act of an outcast. We could no longer remain here. Having spoken these words, the two ministers grasped their swords and stepped back. Agitated and frightened, Ajatasattu said to Jivaka, "Are you not on my side?" Jivaka replied, "Your Majesty, please restrain yourself and do not kill your mother." Hearing this, the king repented and begged their forgiveness. Having thrown away his sword, he stopped short of killing his mother and instead ordered the court officials to lock her up in an inner chamber and not allow her to leave. Vayadehi, thus confined, grew emaciated with grief and despair. Facing Vulture Peak, she worshipped the Buddha from afar and said, "O Tathagata, world-honored one, you used to send Ananda to comfort me. Now I am in deep sorrow and distress. Since there is no way of my coming to look upon your august countenance, world-honored one, I pray you and Venerable Mahamadgalyayana and Venerable Ananda here to see me." When she had said these words, tears of sorrow streamed down her cheeks like rain. Then she bowed toward the Buddha in the distance. But even before she raised her head, the world-honored one, who was then staying on Vulture Peak, knew Vayadehi's thoughts and immediately ordered Mahamadgalyayana and Ananda to go to her through the air. He himself disappeared from the mountain and reappeared in the inner chamber of the royal palace. After worshiping him, Vayadehi raised her head and saw Shakyamuni Buddha, the world-honored one. He was the color of purple gold and was seated upon a lotus flower of 100 jewels. He was attended by Mahamadgalyayana on his left and Ananda on his right. Chakra, Brahma, the guardian gods of the world, and other devas were in the air about him. Scattering heavenly blossoms like rain, they paid homage to the Buddha. When she saw the world-honored one, Vayadehi tore off her ornaments and prostrated herself on the ground. Weeping bitterly, she said to the Buddha, "O world-honored one, what bad karma did I commit in former lives that I have given birth to such an evil son? I wonder, world-honored one, what karmic relations could have made you a relative of Devadatta?" Because Devadatta, again, is his cousin and actually made attempts on the life of the Buddha and attempted to cause a schism in the Sangha. "I beseech you, world-honored one, to reveal to me a land of no sorrow and no affliction where I can be reborn. I do not wish to live in this defiled and evil world of Jandubvipa, where there are hells, realms of hungry ghosts, animals, and many vile beings. I wish that in the future I shall not hear evil words or see wicked people. World-honored one, I now kneel down to repent and beg you to take pity on me. I entreat you, O sun-like Buddha, to teach me how to visualize a land of pure karmic perfection." Then the world-honored one set forth from between his eyebrows a flood of light that was the color of gold and illuminated the innumerable worlds in the 10 directions. Returning to the Buddha, the light settled on his head and transformed itself into a golden platform resembling Mount Sumeru. The platform appeared the pure and resplendent lands of all the Buddhas in the 10 directions. Some of these lands were made of the 7 kinds of jewels, some solely of lotus flowers. Some resembled a palace in the heaven of free enjoyment of manifestations by others, while some were like a crystal mirror in which all the lands in the 10 directions were reflected. Innumerable Buddha lands like these, glorious and beautiful, were displayed to her. Vayadehi then said to the Buddha, "O world-honored one, these Buddha lands are pure and free of defilement, and all of them are resplendent. But I wish to be born in the land of utmost bliss of Amitayus. I beseech you, world-honored one, to teach me how to contemplate that land and attain samadhi." World-honored one smiled, and from his mouth came 5 colored rays of light, each shining on King Bimbisara's head. Although the old king was confined, with his unhindered mind's eye, he saw the world-honored one in the distance. He knelt down in homage to the Buddha and effortlessly made spiritual progress until he reached the stage of a non-returner. Then the world-honored one said to Vayadehi, "Do you know that Amitayus is not far away? Fix your thoughts upon and contemplate that Buddha land. Then you will accomplish the pure acts. I shall describe it to you in detail with various illustrations, so that all ordinary people in the future who wish to practice pure karma may also be born in the Western land of utmost bliss. Whoever wishes to be born there should practice the 3 acts. First, caring for one's parents, attending to one's teachers and elders, compassionately refraining from killing, and doing the 10 good deeds. Second, taking the 3 refuges, keeping the various precepts, and refraining from breaking the rules of conduct. And third, awakening aspiration for enlightenment, bodhicitta, believing deeply in the law of causality, chanting the Mahayana Sutras, and encouraging people to follow their teachings. These 3 are called pure karma. The Buddha further said to Vayadehi, "Do you know that these 3 acts are the pure karma practiced by all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future as the right cause of enlightenment?" All right, so it goes on describing the Pure Land in tremendous detail and giving her these teachings in this moment of, tremendous loss. There's something about this that has always struck me. I mean, certainly it's a sutra, why wouldn't it? But it's the world that we live in. Here you are, this prince, overthrows his father, the king, and then does this cruelty towards his own mother as she's trying to just lessen the suffering of her husband. All of this happening, and the Buddha in the midst of this. And you see that the Buddha is not like some sort of, warrior king or something that you just march in and overthrow a Jatasattu. And here's the Jatasattu, conspiring with Devadatta, who's like the sort of the big evil one in the Buddha's history. At least twice tried to kill the Buddha and very much tried to create his own kind of Sangha, denigrating the Buddha and wanting to have something that was more ascetic. So the stories to me are so, human, and the stories therefore have great power. But this faith of them too, and I believe these things actually happen this way in a literal way. So at the end, one of the other sutras, that's the long one, but in the short one, Shariputra, again, one of the 10 great disciples, is asking the Buddha to teach about Amitabha. And he does in great detail, describing the Pure Land and that. And this is significant because before becoming Buddha Amitabha, Dhammaraja, that was the name of the layperson who, I don't think he was a monk, I'm not sure, but at any rate, would become a Buddha Amitabha. He took something like 48 great vows. I can't remember exactly, but the most important one, I think, is the 18th, where it says, I will not become a Buddha. I will not enter Buddhahood unless any sentient being thinking of me like 10 times, 10 pure time mind moments, 10 times, reciting my name, thinking of me 10 times, would therefore, by that cause, be born in the Pure Land. So in this sutra, because Buddha Shakyamuni, our historical sutra, historical Buddha, is talking about Amitabha, we know that Amitabha came to enlightenment. And because his 18th vow said, I'm not coming to enlightenment unless anyone can get to the Pure Land this easily, we know that happened. Let me see if I can find the actual vow. Yes. 18th vow, right, of the 48. If, upon my obtaining Buddhahood, that is, obtaining enlightenment, all beings in the 10 quarters, everywhere, should not desire in sincerity and truthfulness to be born in my country, and if they should not be born there by only thinking of me for, say, up to 10 times, except for those who have committed the 5 grave offenses and those who are abusive of the true Dharma, may I not obtain the highest enlightenment. And since we know he did obtain the highest enlightenment, we know that that vow is true. So in the short Pure Land Sutra, Buddha Shariputra asking and Buddha Shakyamuni describing this Pure Land. It concludes, he says, Shariputra, why do you think this teaching is called the Sutra of Protection by all Buddhas? Shariputra, all good men and women who hear this sutra and hold fast to it, and also those who hear the names of those Buddhas, are protected by all the Buddhas and dwell in the stage of non-retrogression for realizing highest perfect enlightenment. This is why, Shariputra, you should accept my words in faith and the teachings of all the Buddhas. Shariputra, those who have already aspired, now aspire, or in the future will aspire to be born in the land of Amitayus Buddha, all dwell in the stage of non-retrogression for realizing highest perfect enlightenment. They have already been born, are now being born, or will be born in that land. Hence, Shariputra, good men and women of faith should aspire to birth there. Shariputra, just as I now praise the inconceivable virtue of other Buddhas, they also praise my inconceivable virtue, saying, Shakyamuni Buddha, you have accomplished an extremely difficult and unprecedented task. In this Saha world, during the evil period of the 5 defilements, the defilement of time, the defilement of views, the defilement of passions, the defilements of sentient beings, and the defilement of lifespan. You have attained highest perfect enlightenment, and for the sake of sentient beings, have delivered this teaching, which is the most difficult in the world to accept in faith. Shariputra, you must realize that I have accomplished this difficult task during the period of the 5 defilements. That is to say, having attained highest perfect enlightenment, I have, for the sake of the world, delivered this teaching, which is so hard for people to accept in faith. This is indeed an extremely difficult task. When the Buddha had delivered this sutra, Shariputra and all the monks, together with beings of the whole world, including devas, humans, asuras, rejoiced at what they had heard and reverently accepted it. Having worshipped him, they departed. So this sutra was given in Rajgir, Vulture Peak Mountain. It's the same place where Buddha gave the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. There's this wonderful kind of concurrence, you might say. And I love the way that he says this simple, practice of faith, so hard to accept. It really puts the button on it, our situation as human beings. We should never despair, because the teachings are that these teachings are extremely rare. It becomes certainly poignant, but more and more tragic, to see the world. Professor Kanze said somewhere that he's writing in 1964 and talking about the increasing atomization of human beings in the West, cut off from traditions, cut off from, these days, even family, and these, mediating institutions. Used to be between the government and individuals, all sorts of private organizations and churches and things. now they all just go down to this, rank self sort of thing, like on the internet. It's really that kind of process. But Kanzi says, so 1964, that the suffering, the alienation, the loneliness, the sort of just feeling like, lack of support, lack of love in the Western world, especially the Western world, that there are so many people looking for a true refuge, much like Paul Gauguin, finding Tahiti. People are looking like that. And so much so that we have scholars, spending oceans of ink, uh, analyzing and sort of exploring every kind of minor culture and primitive cultures around the world, all of this. Despite that's true, he says that the answer to this is in the wonderful, fantastic mental images and practices of the Mahayana. And yet, although there it is, nobody's interested. That's really it. The more we practice, the more we see the incredible power of this self-grasping and how so desperate wanting happiness, freedom from fear, everything. And yet, do everything in the terms of this ego. In fact, even how we think we're going to, come to our own enlightenment through the way of the manipulations of the ego, rather than just this pure faith that's expressed in the Pure Land teachings. No thought at all besides this confidence in Amitabha, which of course is our true nature, and the oneness in the chant. And so too for us, we can take lessons of that kind of faith in this faith in Guru Yoga, this direct transmission of blessings from the mind of the Lama to the mind of the Chela, the mind of the disciple. But of course, the Lama is your mind too, but this exceedingly skillful way of coming back to your own mind. That story that you've heard me say, I think it's a European story. Supposedly there was some poor man in maybe Germany, anyway, Central Europe somewhere. And, he had a wife and children, and they were just dirt poor. And he was in such turmoil about this and agony about, fearful, wanting to provide for his family. And one night he had a dream. And it was a dream about a castle, and that in the courtyard of that castle, if you dug down, there was a treasure chest of jewels that would satisfy all his urgings and fears. And he did this amazing thing, is that he just, based on pure faith, he just up and left. He told his wife and the kids, I'll be back. I'm going to get these jewels and everything will be fine. And he just started walking where his want would take him. And after lots of struggles and, several months travels, he comes over out of a forest, and down below he sees the castle of his dreams. There it is, exactly. And he goes down. He's just so happy. He goes down, and of course, at the gate, at the entrance, are guards, these ferocious guards. And he's thinking to himself, how can I get by there? So he waits till the evening, and he tries to sneak by, but the guards catch him, and they take him into the courtyard, and saying to him, what the heck are you doing? And he said, all right, I'll tell you. I'm sorry, but I had this dream, and I dreamt of this castle. And I dreamt that in the courtyard here, like 6 feet down, was this treasure chest. And it was full of jewels, and it was going to be the answer to all of my prayers. Please, please, let me dig. I'll share with you. And one of the guards, they're ribbing him. And one of the guards said, you fool. You know what? I had a dream last night. And I dreamt of this miserable hovel somewhere in central Germany. And there was some harried looking woman there at a very poor fire. And, 5 hungry kids, no man around. And you know what? I dreamt that there was a treasure chest underneath the hearth, about 3 feet down. he described the house, and the man was shocked because he was describing his own home perfectly. And so he leapt up, ran out, and traveled steadily to his house, entered, dug down, and there was the treasure. So we each have this treasure in our own heart, and yet we somehow have to go through this journey to find it. So you can say that that whole journey is like, illusory. You can say that it's not necessary if you want to just get to the end of it all. But at the same time, it is necessary, because that's how we have to manifest our own true nature. And that's what the Dharma is. Okay, so maybe that's enough for tonight. I wanted to just touch on that because I was really moved this week by, the death of this poor little boy, and thinking just how fortunate he was. I mean, Kempo called the Dalai Lama to ask for prayers. His Garu Mache praying for him, and it was happening at the same time of this great transmission, 2 months of teachings and transmissions of the complete Drikun lineage given in some suburb of Kathmandu, I believe. There's a new monastery there, given by His Holiness Drikun Chabgun. This is extremely rare that things would happen just like this. And so whatever, for the little boy, very sad on an ordinary level, but who knows? Okay, let's stop there for tonight. Any questions from our Zoomers, our loyal Zoomers? So happy you're there.
No questions, but thank you.
You're welcome. You are welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
You are welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Yeah, this wonderful poem from in Japan. It's said that the practitioners of the Pure Land teachings are generally more humble in like class, societal class. The simple practice of this just simple praying to Amitabha. And this wonderful teacher, D.T. Suzuki, he was born in the 18, I don't find it here. Suzuki was born, I think, like in the late 1870s. And as a young man, he went to a Zen monastery, and he was like the attendant of a Zen master. I forgot the man's name. But in 1893, we had the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, an auspicious event. And those were this Zen master was invited and gave teachings there. And D.T. Suzuki came with him, was his translator. So Suzuki later trained in a Zen monastery and ended up writing extensively about the perfection of wisdom teachings, the Prajnaparamita, and had great influence in the West. In the early 1950s, he was giving lectures at Columbia. And, really a wonderful teacher, and influenced so many people, especially with the introduction of Zen to America. But as he aged, he actually reverted to the Pure Land teachings of his mother, which again is completely unintellectual. Zen is noted, especially when doing koan practice, is that, many Zen practitioners are very kind of sophisticated intellectually and psychologically, and can, discuss the teachings in this kind of way. But the Pure Land folks are like very simple faith. Yet Suzuki, with his experience, made the statement that actually there were more examples of deeply realized people in the Pure Land traditions of Japan than there were in Zen. But it's just that the Pure Land people weren't talking about it. So they didn't have quite that reputation. So he has, for instance, in this series of lectures that he gave in Columbia in the early 1950s, they put it into a book called The Buddha of Infinite Life and Light. Sorry, Buddha of Infinite Light. And this beautiful statue, Japanese statue on the cover of Buddha Amitabha entering the Pure Land, but yet looking over his shoulder at the sentient beings. It's so beautiful. With an introduction by Taitetsu Uno, who was a Japanese man, professor at Smith, I think, college. He's just passed away a few years ago, has written several books about Pure Land Buddhism, very wonderful man. So he writes the introduction to this collection of lectures that Suzuki gave. But he starts with this terse poem written by Saiichi Myokonin, an unlettered but perceptive practitioner, Pure Land Buddhism. In his words, 84,000 delusions, 84,000 lights, 84,000 joys abounding. So beautiful. Okay, so we dedicate the merit from this evening to all motherly sentient beings. May each and every last one of them come to realize their true nature. And then through this realization, work for the liberation of all sentient beings until each and every one is a Buddha. Svaha. Okay, thank you guys. We'll see you next